Okay, well, look, we've got people in the room and we're going to, the recording will go out to everyone. So we're going to get started. Oliver and I have this sort of double act where he writes stuff down and then shares it with people afterwards. So we'll stop to talk and there's questions. So I'll try to leave time for questions. But essentially what we're going to try to do is tell you what we're about, what we've been developing, and show you the toolkit that we've made. We're very excited that we started almost exactly 2 years ago. I think it was May the 18th, 2020. We got our first school subscribed to our materials. And 2 years later, we've got about 2,100 schools signed up now. And that's including 36 different countries. So we've been blown away by how much demand there's been for the resources and joining our platform. And we're moving to, we started off by sort of rolling out the materials, but now the full toolkit is finished. We've got volumes 1, 2, and 3 of the books are out, and the resources to match that are sort of rolling out this term. By September, we'll have finished the full kit. And we've also recruited a team of Walkthroughs trainers who are starting to be deployable from September, people who work in schools and can do training. And we've got a kind of base, sort of headquarters where we've grown our sort of infrastructure around the support we can provide. So, and that's just in response to the interest. So we'll show you what we offer, and then some of you may already be using Walkthroughs, want to just hear us explain it. But if you've never used the Walkthroughs before, we'll tell you what it's about. To start with, I'm going to show you a PowerPoint, which is a few slides which give us the context of why we think what Walkthroughs is trying to do. So it's the purpose of it. So I'm going to talk you through this slide deck and then show you the tools in a minute. The context then is important. So what's it for? So we haven't made a sort of solution and then saying what should we do with it. We're looking at a problem and trying to solve it. And the problem is that teaching is complicated. So we've made this is our most recent thing that we've made is this diagram, and Oliver made it last week. I think it's absolutely brilliant. It sort of captures a kind of busy classroom, and you might think they should be paying attention, but that's the challenge. Teaching is complicated, and I sit in the back of a class many times a week. I think last week I saw 25 different teachers, and it's complicated. Even very experienced teachers are working really hard all the time to think about what to say, material to present, interactions with the class. It's incredibly dynamic. And as we know, when we're trying to support teachers to do this well, we need to have a language for it. We need to describe what we do. We need to describe the problems we experience, and we need to have some tools to solve some of the challenges. And some of the challenges can all be linked to the way we learn. So as well as looking at it from a sort of relational kind of challenge, we've also got the cognitive aspect, which is that sometimes students don't have the knowledge they should have. Attention is hard to sustain, memory overload, there's too much happening. Sometimes they don't have enough fluency and confidence with the material to build on it. And sometimes they're doing things but not learning because the task is a poor proxy for the learning. So all of these are the things we're trying to address. And in order to get teachers to do that, they have the same. The teachers themselves have got attention issues and knowledge to acquire, and we have to attend to the teachers as learners as well. So we need systems which allow us to do that. Now, the research around effective CPDs is quite extensive, and we've tried to sort of build on this. You need cycles, you need iterative cycles where you go through processes of planning things you're going to do, which people understand through a common language. Then people go off and do them and generate feedback about how well that's going, and then reflect and review and think about what to do next and get cycles of it, incremental improvement. So we know this from the evidence around effective teaching, that you need incremental improvement. But in order to sustain that in a cycle of professional development activities, it's difficult if you don't know what you're talking about. So what is the reference? What are we, when we're saying about a questioning method or a retrieval practice method, how do we communicate that to each other? We need some reference. And what's interesting is that the mechanisms for CPD can be quite varied. And this is a brilliant paper. And this is taken from our volume 3. So we've looked at the research from the Education Endowment Foundation that's quite recent. And they talk about these mechanisms rather than techniques. So rather than instructional coaching per se, or lesson study, or teacher learning communities, or other forms of CPD that have been studied, they're saying really, it's the mechanisms that those systems deliver that matter. So building knowledge, you've got to support teachers to build knowledge over time, which means you've got to revisit things. You've got to motivate teachers, so you've got to have processes which help teachers feel supported and get affirmation from incremental development, as well as a collaborative aspect which helps motivation. You also need to develop the techniques. Teachers, you need opportunity to actually practice and get into the detail of what techniques might be. So we need them to be modeled. And finally, you need to embed them. So you need processes which allow you to sort of keep coming back to things and develop them in your practice. So we are trying to develop a toolkit. Now, we didn't know this. We've mapped our walkthroughs to this, and we feel that the Walkthroughs CPD toolkit delivers on all of these, because it allows you to do all of those 4 types of mechanisms over time. One of the messages we always give to teachers in our training is this, that teachers have to be themselves. So there's not some sort of formula. There isn't some mechanism of saying, be like this, and everyone tick the box and go through the motions. Teachers have to develop as themselves. So they have to have agency in their professional learning. They have to become a more effective version of themselves. And they need fundamentally to be able to evaluate their practice on their own, for a large proportion of the time, because that's where they are. And it's so important that teachers feel that sense of ownership, belonging, control, autonomy, as well as having a toolkit for reflecting on how effective they're being. And that needs a language and a reference frame. So that's another important idea. And we want teachers to be evidence informed. Our teaching techniques need to be based on evidence. Now, evidence informed doesn't mean that we've looked at all the studies and, such and such an effect has a 0.4 effect size and that kind of thing. That's not really what we mean. What we really mean is that we have an understanding of the learning process. So when we're saying evidence informed, the evidence that leads us to a big and good overview of how learning happens in complex situations, that's the evidence base. So our CPD program needs to deliver on all of these things, and we think that ours does. And the last couple of things, we're not interested in speed cameras. So we're not interested in things which are do it once and move on and to impress your line manager. So we have quite strong views in Walkthroughs about top-down observation cultures, graded lesson observations and things like that. We're not interested in that. We're interested in teachers crafting habits which are going to be more effective in the classroom. So they need a language for that. They need reference frames. And this is well supported by the research which is into how people develop expertise. The work of Erickson and others has informed the Deans for Impact studies into how teachers develop their expertise. And this excellent flow, teachers need to push just beyond small changes. They need to focus on specific goals that they're working towards, which are related to student learning. They need to focus, meaning they have to sustain that over time, not just flick from one thing to another. And they need a way of generating feedback. And all along, forming a mental model of why the things work. So we need a toolkit which does all of that. It also needs to operate at various levels. So a good CPD toolkit will inform school processes like whole school CPD. There's really good value in a whole group of staff learning about aspects of cognitive science all together, because it's common knowledge everyone needs to have, or some common concepts about assessment. But then mostly people exist in teams. So people are in their year teams, their phase teams, their subject teams. But we need coherence there. It's no good if the whole school system and then the teams are off at odds with each other. We need the language about teaching that happens at whole school or whole college to be echoed in all the team meetings across the school, and down to the individual processes like coaching, pairs and triads, and collaborative processes and individual reflection processes. So we need a system which delivers on all of that. Now, some useful references. We're a big fan of Rosenshine's principles, for example. That's good. A lot of schools have said, well, why don't we just use Rosenshine's principles? The paper's really good. It's got these 4 strands as we express them and of ideas. And, you know, within that, you've got some really simple ideas: reviewing material, questioning and checking for understanding, sequencing concepts, practice. All these are really good ideas for talking about teaching. Who doesn't use those? Every teacher uses those ideas. But the challenge is getting below the surface of that. So even if you make a list of cold call, no opt-out, check for understanding, everything that we use as a language for describing teaching needs further articulation. We need to explain it even more. What does cold calling mean? What does no opt-out mean? What does check for understanding mean? We can't just constantly describe it. So what we decided early on is that we needed to capture all these ideas that are out there and put them into some steps to codify. So we started saying, well, let's have a look at cold calling. Cold calling looks like this. We ask the class a question, we give thinking time, we select someone to respond, we then listen to the answer and respond to the answer, and then we ask someone else the same question, so we get start getting a sense of the range of answers in the room. So cold calling, when it's codified, gives you a framework for doing all those things. We could do a whole school CPD on that. We could do a team discussion around that. And an individual person with their coach can talk about that or just think about it on their own. And each group of people is talking about cold calling based on the same definition. So live modeling. What does live modeling look like? Well, modeling is quite broad, but we can start talking about some general ideas about what modeling might look like and start saying that, do you model each stage step by step? Do you narrate your messy thinking before you organize your thoughts, which is what people naturally do? Do you stand back and review the success of your work and go, have I done it right? Do we then look at more than one example so students can see different pathways and compare alternative methods and ideas? And then do the students get a chance to emulate that model so that they can actually then do the thing that you've modeled? Sounds so basic, but if you codify something like that, we've got a framework for thinking about where we might refine our practice. Why is it that some children still find that hard? So that's where the walkthroughs come in. And what we find is that it deals with lots of the issues. So we get away from professional amnesia. So many schools, like, they talk about, people will say things like, oh, we did cold calling last year. Or literally, I've been to schools that say, oh, we did cold calling last year, as if like that means we don't have to do it anymore, even though they've got 10 new teachers that year. Or people say, oh, God, retrieval practice is something that's been there for donkey's years. It's nothing new. Well, of course not. We need to hold on to a set of ideas. We also need to stop them distorting. So what can happen is if you just do a one-off training event and everyone thinks they've heard about, say, metacognitive talk or something, they think everyone knows what it means. 6 months later, 20 teachers have got 20 different versions of what that means, and it's become distorted. And sometimes we get lethal mutations of things just being really bad practice, even though they started off being effective. I see that happening with, say, retrieval practice, where people are quizzing in a very shallow way, and it's not what the original kind of idea about retrieval practice was. With walkthroughs, what we've done is we've created them to be generic. So across the school, and I've done training and worked with organizations that have got early years all the way to 18-year-olds. And you can have coherent conversations about similar ideas because the generic nature of the walkthroughs allows you to discuss techniques knowing that they're going to be adapted into their appropriate home. So a year 1 teacher and a year 6 teacher can both talk about writing, albeit that from different perspectives. A history teacher and a science teacher can talk about questioning techniques, but there might be slightly different emphasis and when they come into their context. So all of that allows teachers to when we break it down to steps, for them to assimilate their knowledge, and we come back to this memory model over and over again. So a walkthrough looks like this. In the books, it looks like that. Each step has got text and it's much more detailed, but it also works at the level of the heading. So once you know what ask the class the question means and you've discussed it, it reminds you, it's like a prompt. So the visual guide gives you the visual description, the verbal description, the visual depiction, and then we have to model it. So in training, we model them. So we've got some, initially some video of me explaining all the techniques. So all the techniques on the website have me explaining them. And we encourage people to act them out, to model them directly in training. So you get these three things interacting: reading about them, visualizing them, and seeing them modeled. It gives you a really good shared understanding of what the techniques are. Then the walkthroughs feed into processes like coaching. So a coaching cycle implies iterative reflection. So once this group of teachers, this pair of teachers, they're sitting around talking about a technique, because they can talk about the technique that's there in front of them in the book, on the computer, both of the people have got a shared understanding of what that technique is. So when a lesson observation has started, that teacher is performing the technique in the same way that they discussed in their coaching session. And so when they reflect on it afterwards, what's happening is that they've got this even deeper understanding. We talked about it, now we've both seen it, and we can talk about the problems, the strengths, the things to focus. And so when we go again next, we're getting more and more detailed into the specific aspect of the technique which needs to be refined. And that informs processes on and on and on. Now that instructional coaching has got a pedigree. It delivers on all those mechanisms. And what Jim Knight says about it is that in order to be effective, you need to have a repertoire. So he puts it this way: instructional coaches run the risk of being inefficient if they don't have a repertoire of effective practices. So we need to develop that repertoire in order to be effective in coaching. So we then need to personalize. So we take the generic technique, and we have this thing called the adapt process, which says take the technique, attempt it, have a go at it, develop it, add detail to it, adapt it more fundamentally, which means change the steps around or subtly nuance it, practice it to get better at it, and finally evaluate it, test it. Does it work? And we don't test things by sitting around the table saying, how does it feel for you? Oh, it feels great. We say, I'm getting better work from my students now. I'm seeing stronger responses from my students in the way they talk, in their behaviors, in their writing, and we test it in that sense. The last sort of general thing about walkthroughs is that it's informed by the research and the practice around instructional coaching and the nature of feedback. So this is a really strong theme in our process, which is that the Banbrick-Santoyo approach to giving feedback: provide precise praise, probe, identify the problem and a concrete action step, practice, and then plan ahead. Now, last week I was in a school where all the middle leaders who I was observing lessons with, one by one, they had this as their guide. So we were looking at lessons and they were looking at, say, a teacher doing a technique called Say It Again Better. Precise praise. What are we going to say that teacher? What are we going to identify as the thing that's going well? Probe. What way could that teacher develop that technique more? And this is frames a conversation for the conversation that team leaders, senior leaders can have with teachers. So the defined walkthroughs plus this approach gives you a brilliant way of talking about teaching. You've got an agenda for how to structure a conversation and an agenda for each technique generated by the walkthroughs. Increasingly, what we found is that walkthroughs also work at a sort of policy level. So I'll show you in a minute the Twitter feed on this, but as well as being a single walkthrough, we can start saying, well, one walkthrough normally works better when it's clustered. So we have this language called clusters. So cold calling works better if you also have think, pair, share going well and checking for understanding. And that might form part of a wider set of ideas and schools are using our cluster builder tool to say, well, which set of ideas are we clustering together to deal with this issue and to deal with that issue? A bit like, and Oliver uses this great diagram, the serve, volley, smash. When you're good at tennis, you're not just good at one shot. You have to practice each shot on its own, but then you combine them to be very effective. So teachers similarly need to combine their techniques, and the cluster builder tool has become one of our most popular features of the toolkit, that we define the techniques and then we have a toolkit for working out how they connect. That's a behavior cluster. So when teams are meeting, they've got shared understanding around the way techniques combine, the detail of them, and also a shared understanding of a process of feedback, precise praise, probe, and it, you know, this is what we've made. And it can be happening at a coaching level, one-to-one, or in the training. So right from the beginning, when you introduce ideas, you've got resources where all of these three settings, the CPD input phase, the team discussion phase, and the individual coaching are all informed by the same ideas. And so you get really strong coherence. Now, in our schools, and we have hundreds of schools now, and we've visited many of them, this is the strongest feature we see. The shared language. When you go into a school or a set of schools in a multi-academy trust, everyone knows what you mean when you say it again better, or scaffolding, or positive framing. Everyone knows the techniques, the ways that we use the techniques. So now I'm going to sort of come out of this particular slideshow and show you what the resources look like. So that's the kind of rationale for them. What do you actually get if you subscribe as a member? Let me stop that share and then just reshare. What you get is you get this to join this website. So the website here is that's the public version. And we try to sort of highlight various things on here. When you join, you get access to, it says at the moment, 1 pack or 3 pack. Now this is going to change. So we're currently phasing out our basic subscription, because over the next year we're going to migrate to a one-size-fits-all full pack only, and that because we feel that's the best for schools, to have all of the materials and for us to just promote that. Initially we had a basic pack, but they were on a journey to just having 1 full pack. So that's what we're sort of going to focus on. So when I log in, each school has just 1 login. So there's no individual login. I've used my password to access this. You would get a password, and everyone in your school would have the same. So it's very easy. Everyone gets it. And there are various things that you then have access to. There's a Google site, which I'll show you in a minute. There's some introductory videos. There are various webinars. So if I click on here, you see all the webinars that we do are recorded, and Oliver does this A4 summary. So every month we do webinars about the techniques. So here's me talking about Mode B teaching. Here's me talking about popular clusters, behavior and questioning. So there's like CPD, like an hour video of a training on the techniques, and Oliver's produced a lovely summary of them here, which you can just email to people. So the webinars is a regular feature. We also have a set of guides for getting started, and the slide decks, the workbooks, trainer notes. These can all be downloaded. So the trainer notes, for example, the volume 3 is on its way. You've got detailed notes of all of the different techniques here. So, for example, the trainer notes, if it just opening up, hopefully. If I want going to run training on the volume 1 walkthroughs, there's some guidance about how to set up training, and I get to guidance like this, and it talks about how to use the different slide decks in order to deliver the training. So some guidance for this person delivering the training about what they might say when they're delivering the training. So every single one of our walkthroughs has got a page of guidance for a trainer delivering a training session. There's also workbooks. So different teachers can have, there are different types of workbook. There are ones that you just print off the page for the walkthrough you're focusing on, or where you can just print the individual page, print all of them off at once. So these are quite extensive. So all of that is available just on the main site. Increasingly, though, we're focusing on the Google site here, because this is our main way of deploying, and member schools, so schools who join us and carry on as members, which will become an annual membership, will access this, and all of our resources are embedded in here. So when you get to the Google site, you can start seeing more fully exactly what you have. So we have the following the books, why, what, and how, and you can see them down here. So the why section includes all of the different research papers. So we've got summaries of Rosenshine's principles, why don't students like school, an ethic of excellence, Graham Nuttall's Hidden Lives of Learners, the professional development mechanisms I've just shown you just now, and some brilliant things like, for example, Effective First has done a superb thing for us around memory. If I click on here, we get a page all about making meaning. It's got a summary of her ideas there and a slide deck which you can use in your training. So for all of the different why sections, you've got a range of background knowledge that teachers can engage with and you can use for training. It includes things like concepts in writing, in reading. If you want to do a thing about the Scarborough reading rope, we've got a superb thing from Christopher Such explaining that here, and so on. So there's lots of tools for training on a whole range of things in the why section. The how section is about how you use the walkthroughs. So the how section includes sorry, I clicked on the wrong button. Apologies. I'll slow down. The how section, you can see here, that includes things like, how do I do instructional coaching? How do we do a thing called solve the learning problems? How do I run a lesson observation? How do I run a thing called a teaching sprint, which is really brilliant CPD, like on sort of 4-week cycles. So there's a whole ton of ideas there about how to use the walkthroughs for delivering the CPD. But the core material is in all of the other sections, the other series. So behavior and relationships, curriculum planning, explaining and modeling, questioning and feedback. So let's say we're looking at questioning and feedback. You can see there's a whole range of techniques here, which are linked by these hexagons. And each one of those, when you click on those, goes through to a whole set of resources for all of them. One of the very popular ones is Say It Again Better. It's a great questioning technique. So the Say It Again Better page looks like this. It's got a summary of the five steps, which matches the book. And underneath that, you'll get access to an adapt page, a workbook page, a trainer notes page, the slides, and a video. So everything you need to discuss Say It Again Better as a technique is there. And these things can be printed, downloaded. So for example, you might click on the home, we call this the home page because it's a simple A4 printable sheet for each one. So that's just like printable. But also, if you're familiar with Google, you just go File, make a copy, and everyone can have their own editable copy and write on it and make notes in it. So that's a very popular aspect of the walkthroughs, that for every single technique, you can produce on a bespoke basis a printed document to write on during the training or for reflection. And it can be electronic or on paper. All of this works well on any device. So what I find really amazing is you just open this website on your phone, and the way it all adjusts is really, really smart. So the video plays nicely on there, the slides play nicely on there, and you've got teachers who can sort of see, you see them in CPD sessions looking and browsing, and it works really, really well. Some other features, once we go beyond the kind of core, the kind of materials, all the different sections. I'll just show you one more, just to show you how that it's coherent actually. So practice and retrieval. Let's say there's a technique called practice explaining, which is something I'm particularly passionate about. This is where students, they get high quality explanations modeled to them. They then rehearse explaining to each other, and then we sample the room by cold calling, we give feedback about the quality of the explanation, and then we get the students to try it again to see if they can explain it better. So this is, for me, a really important loop that often is missing in school, of children getting a second go to explain things, and then having a go at rehearsing, how do I explain this, rather than just one or two children getting the cut to chance and everyone just listening. Everyone's having a go at explaining something, getting some feedback, and explaining it again better. So again, you can see the same summary page here, and all the materials here, the home page, the adapt page, the slides, and the video. So once you know what things are, in general, every single walkthrough has the same repeatable look and feel, and you can find things quite quickly. Some additional tools then, we've got, some people are, the ECF, the Early Career Framework toolkit is here. And we're about to update this. This is one of our last jobs to do. We've done this for the volume 1 and 2, but we haven't yet done it for volume 3. So we're working on that at the moment. So for all of the aspects of the Early Career Framework, we've shown you how the Walkthroughs works. And these hexagons are active. So if I look in this section called Early Career Framework, set high expectations, and one of the suggested techniques to look at is spot your mistakes, I can click on that icon and it will open up the Spot Your Mistakes homepage. So it's not just something to look at, it's something which interactively leads you to the tools you need to have those discussions. So that's a popular feature, that the hyperlinked Early Career Framework tool. We have a Core 10 workbook. Now, right at the beginning, so going back to June 2020, we asked our first 100 subscribers, are there core techniques that we think we could expand a little bit more on? And we had a vote from them, and they selected positive relationships, established expectations, sequence concepts, and small steps. I won't read them all out, but these 10 techniques here. And this is a booklet which a lot of schools have used as the backbone of their CPD, because you can, again, email it to everybody, they all make a copy, and in it, it's all hyperlinked so that people can just go to all the different techniques, read the key ideas about them. And also, it's got a page at the back where you can track lesson observations, and that every teacher can have their own. And again, it's a nice, neat pack of all the resources in one place. So you don't have to have that within the website. You just take it, email it around, and that type of idea people like. The cluster builder is where people are really gone to town on sort of making things bespoke, and it allows you to combine any number of all of the different walkthroughs into any combination. So the problem with the Core 10 booklet is there's only 10, and there's only the 10 that we made. But with the cluster builder, you can literally take any combination of any of the 150 odd walkthroughs and start making them join up like this. And people are starting to use this to sort of shape their policies, and so many amazing things have been made with the cluster builder. I'm going to show you those in a minute. So the cluster builder tool has been really, really popular to bring ideas together, to get people to sketch through their thoughts. So that's that, alongside the trainer materials, also embedded in the Google site here, the trainer notes, the workbooks, everything is accessible here. So the Google site is a really useful way of us housing all our resources in one platform, and you get access to that by being an annual subscribing member. Some people who joined initially they'll have, if they decide not to continue as members, they will be able to download all the stuff and keep them offline forever. And that, well, we said that right from the beginning, but we're moving now to more an annual subscription thing, so that we have keeping a kind of contact with people into the future with updates and ongoing webinars and training, access to training, and some tools like this. So one of our recent developments is this tracker here. So this is coming out in September, a coaching tracker form where you can set this up to send to your teacher. Teachers can have their own track the conversations. They can look at where they're up to with a particular technique, and it asks you all the questions that you might want to ask, collect data on where people are with which walkthroughs, set dates for planning, and go through the Bambricks and Toya coaching process. So precise praise, it's a prompt, what's been going well, we enter that. Probe, let's talk about this, and that's just a text box to complete. What's the problem and the action step, and talk about how to practice it. And then finally, the planning ahead. So what are you going to do next, by which date? And when you submit that goes into a place which you can keep your own record of all of your own coaching conversations. The teacher can own that just for themselves, or they can choose to share it with their coach. And so these are the sorts of tools that we're working on, which will which will continue to develop. Okay, so I'll take some questions in a second. I'm just going to show you one more thing, which is to give you a sense of the community that you're joining. Because one of the things I love about Walkthroughs is just how it's inspired people to get creative with their CPD. So the best way for me to show that to you is to show you our Twitter feed. So this is our Walkthroughs Twitter feed. And people just tweet this stuff and I bookmark it. So you're seeing, this is a live Twitter feed. So you can see it says about Boris Johnson on it. So apparently he takes full responsibility. So this is just today. Andrew, who I don't know, but there he is tweeting about subject leader work at his trust. And what I love is you see the slides here. So here he is in a training session. You've got teachers talking about what they would normally do, but in part of that is feedback as actions, which looks like it's changed color. So they've taken our feedback as actions and they've adapted it into their own style. That's the Walkthrough stuff rebranded because it's theirs, and we encourage that. We're not sort of super proprietorial. We love it when people take our material and make it feel like it belongs to them. Here you've got a training session in an FE college. That happens to be Oliver standing there, but that's a bit of a rare treat. This is a classic scene to me. Like, you've got teachers there. I love this. It's sort of humble. There's a group of teachers talking about teaching in a room. That is what happens all over the world. Teachers in a room talking about teaching, and here they are being informed by the Walkthroughs, using it as their toolkit, their reference frame. It's on their laptops. They can take it home, and that's making those conversations richer because they've got a common language, a common toolkit. Here you've got Nicola. Nicola Cole is like a genius of making clusters. So here you can see she's got the latest edition of her teaching and learning bulletin. She's probably been doing teaching and learning bulletins for years, but now as a Walkthrough school, she's doing this where she's got the Londondale High School Walkthroughs to obtain a high success rate. So she's using the cluster builder tools to articulate some thoughts about how you build. And if you read that, if you get into the detail of that, sequence concepts in small steps, responsive lesson planning, chunking, these are all ideas in Walkthroughs. And she's done the thinking for people so they can just use the tools. Live modeling, giving a practical demonstration, modeling handover. So she's linked these ideas together. Check for understanding, normalize error, and show call. Really nice, and that is a really good flow of ideas. Independent practice, building fluency, sustained independent practice, and all of that linked to consolidation. That is someone who really gets teaching, using our toolkit to express that in a way which then links to the tools. And I think that's magnificent. And so on. So you just, all the way down, you've got similar examples constantly, people being creative. Here's another person called Nikki Sullivan, who works at Beckford, and this is her cluster build. Planning the questions, planning the means of response, hinging from student responses. So show me boards linked with think, pair, share, cold calling. Again, the Walkthroughs toolkit gives them the bits, like the Lego, to build their PD kit. So it's highly configurable, and that's important. And last one I'll show you, this is Matt Stone, who is one of our key people now, because we've used his design skills to build the toolkit. He's built a lot of our Google stuff, but in his school, he as well as doing a lot of work for us, he does a lot of teacher training at his school, he or he, and this is a classic cluster. Get lessons started. You have to establish your expectations, rehearse routines, and then a repertoire of retrieval routines in the so they can use them in their do now activity. So these are their strong starts expressed through the techniques. So hopefully it gives an idea. I could keep going, but that's just literally, this was last week. So these are some of the recent ones that have caught my attention, but it goes on and on. So the community of Walkthroughs people is strong. You've got lots of people sharing ideas. And so if you wanted to join us, you basically on the main area outside the members area here, we've got a place where you can get in touch and fill in this form, and then our colleague Alex, who receives all of that, will be in touch and say, okay, how big is your school, your college, what do you need, and then we'll talk about joining. And then you'll be, you'll get the materials straight away, and you could be up and running within a couple of days. And that's the situation. So hopefully that's giving you an overview of what Walkthroughs is and what it's trying to do. And I think what I'll do now is I'll stop the share and just make sure that I've got time to take any questions in the chat. Anyone got any questions about Walkthroughs, about the process, about coaching, or any particular details of joining as members? If you don't have any questions, that's always good. But people sometimes takes a while to just get going. Okay, so Mark, thank you so much. Can you confirm the date for the Google form for the coaching tracker? What do you mean when it's going to come out? Yeah, so basically in September. So we'll probably release that probably in July, actually. So for people who are going to be members from September, we'll tell you that we'll send it to you, and we'll announce that it will be available, so you'll be sure. But then you'll be able to download it from the site so you can use it in September. I mean, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking we should probably do that before, because otherwise you won't know it's there. So you need to get used to it. So we'll probably release it in a couple of months' time. There are several other ones as well. I mean, we've been working on quite a few documents to help the coaching. Simple word-based trackers. So everything will have 3 forms. It will be a Word version, it will be a Google form, and also we're going to get someone to make it for us to be compatible with Microsoft Teams, although that is still something we haven't done yet. But we're aware that some schools are Teams schools, and you might prefer your forms to be Microsoft Teams forms rather than Google forms. So we're going to look into that. July would be great. Okay, I can take that as a let's go for then. If we introduce a new step, how many should we do in a term? Well, these are the sorts of detailed questions that people ask. I think we always say you have to sort of work with the people in front of you. So some schools, like for example, I did a training earlier this week with a school in Bangkok, Patna, and I was part of this brilliant CPD process where they've explored Walkthroughs and some initial coaching training, and they were planning next year their focus. So they had a staff meeting, which I was watching, where they sort of discussed and voted for their 6, and they went for 7 in the end, because 7's quite neat because you have 1 in the middle and 6 around the outside. 7 Walkthroughs to be their kind of main core. And within that, some of the teachers will be working on 1 because it's just their main focus. Other teachers will be working between 2 or 3 together in a cluster, depending on their confidence. So it's hard to say how many you should work on, and it depends on the context. But my firm belief is that where I've seen Walkthroughs have the biggest impact, it's where a school has gone for a quite tight set of Walkthroughs that everybody works on for the sustained time, like 6 months. And you really see it change. I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes, like you've nailed that because you've been really focusing on it over time. The steps within that Walkthrough might have been taken, some of you might have mastered that and moved on to that. So important not to be too rigid about this though, because sometimes people introduce a technique like signal, pause, insist. You just introduce it, you've got it going in a couple of weeks, bam, like I'm doing it. Signal, pause, insist, I've got it down. And I don't need to keep working on it as my focus because I've already introduced it. So I think some techniques can be quite quick to introduce. Other ones like live modeling can take you kind of months and months to focus on. Okay, so really good questions. All of these are great questions. The difference between the three walkthroughs, there isn't any difference now. Basically, the three volumes are just the order that we came up with them. Literally, that's the truth. So volume 1 was, let's come up with a nice set to start. We knew there'd be 3 volumes. So we thought, well, let's do these because it's a bit of a starter set. Volume 2 was just the next set we thought would be the nice. And then the third was like, this is our last one. So let's be really clear that there's nothing really obvious that we're missing. And so we closed it off with the last one. So, but really, there's just one toolkit now. And that's how we see it. So there's no difference in difficulty or anything like that. Some of the techniques in volume 3 are quite basic. So I hope that explains it. Literally just phasing the rollout. In say 5 years' time, we probably won't even really talk about volumes 1, 2, and 3, except in the books. But on the website, we might even remove that because it's sort of they aren't really separate in that way. Okay, so lots of questions here. Yeah, so the basic only has the volume 1, and also from September, this September, it won't be on the Google site. So from September this year, you'll be able to access the slides, the documents, the videos that are already on there, but none of the new ones, and none of the webinars, and none of the Google site. So we've realized that we think the basic membership is too constricting in when we're actually working in schools. Like, it's a lot of the instructional coaching tools are dealt with in volumes 2 and 3, and so we're just seeing that basic as an initial starter for us almost, and we're kind of winding it down. But if you still have the basic now, we'll say either upgrade to the full one or just download everything, because it's going to be slowly sort of disappearing from the website. And does the toolkit give you example clusters? Yeah, it does. So there are some in there and you can take them. So, and also we promote them. So now what we have is we have a team that we're going to be doing a regular newsletter, which will come out probably every 2 weeks. And in that, every week, there's going to be every newsletter will have like a cluster sample. Like, there'll be, some schools would have made them, we might make them ourselves. So we're going to be regularly communicating, here's a sample, but there are already some in there. If we join, we would need access from next half term. Yeah, when you join straight away. So as soon as you say, yes, please, we go, okay, there's the password. We just tell you to log in, make the password, and then you're away. So it's pretty much instantaneous. How do you recommend launching to staff? Well, we do have a guide for that. So one of the things that we have, I'll briefly show it to you. We have a process which we call getting started. And we have this thing, I'll just for the sake of that question, I'm going to share the screen again. So we have this process called the 5 E's, which I didn't go into just then, but it's there. And we have engage, explore, evaluate, and that's really the first year, and then extend and embed are kind of years 2 and 3. But engage means an event where you tell everybody what it is. So we got guidance on the website for that. So basically, we suggest there are a number of different ways. You have an event where you give people the books or show them the website, get people to discuss a particular walkthrough, so that's one they're familiar with, so they get a feel for it, and then engage people in a discussion about the walkthroughs you're going to be using as a whole staff. The explore means you have to design the process of your CPD meetings as we're going along. So how, of all those things I mentioned earlier, which ones are you going to be using to progress them? So for example, one of the key discussions to have in your school is, are we going to be a team coaching school? Like, are we going to use teams as the main driver? Or are we sort of instructional coaching driven, so it's pairs? And most schools I'm finding find the teams approach much simpler to get going, because the team can discuss something together. They can then do cycles of reflection over time really efficiently. So this cycle here, this cycle here of teams reflecting is often a really good start. So when you're launching, you're sort of telling people the cycle that's going to happen afterwards as well at the same time. So people know this isn't just a one-off thing. It's part of a whole process that we're about to launch. And there are other tips, like, for example, having a nucleus of coaches who get really experienced. So I really recommend, say, a small group of people starting the coaching and starting small with 1 or 2 walkthroughs and then going from there. And nearly everybody does do that. Most people we've worked with would have started quite small with a small team, with a number of walkthroughs, and then after a year or 18 months, you see it's developed from that. Okay, really good questions, all of these. How do we choose each half term? How many do we choose? Yeah, I feel like my feeling is I wouldn't even specify that. One of the things that we say is, what's the learning problem you're trying to solve? The whole point is, what's your school like? And I know a school where they did say it again better for months. I know another one where they did cold calling and think, pair, share, just 2 for a whole year. And when you go to that school, it's really worked. Like, it's lots of pair discussion, really good questioning by cold calling, because they just decided every time they came up to the end of a term, they just said, have we nailed these things yet? No. So let's carry on with them. So I would not prejudge the cycle. And you might find that if you start off with 6 or 8, there's too many, and going down to 3 or 4 for a team might be good. Another common approach is this. Every team in the school decides their own, because they feel more ownership. So I know that's quite common in an FE college or a secondary school, or even in some primary schools, where they said the early years have got their cluster, the Key Stage 1 have got their cluster, Key Stage 2 have got their cluster, because they feel that ownership, even though some of them are common, they feel that it belongs to them. And that sense of ownership is powerful for people. So you might do it like that. And you might say the English department are working on live modeling of writing, and the science department are working on retrieval practice techniques. There's no need for them to do the same if that's not what is identified as common. So I really think that's important to do that, to get close to that. But you might find there are common things, like lots of children need lots more confidence building with being more verbal. So let's do lots of whole school stuff around talk-based techniques like think, pair, share, and say it again better, and scaffolds for dialogue, which is in volume 3, because we're going to just really crack on with talk in classrooms this year. And those 3 walkthroughs, say it again better, think, pair, share, and scaffolds for dialogue, will really push that on. And that's a whole school thing. Doesn't stop anyone using any of the other techniques as well, but that's the headline. Yeah, my advice about introducing the whole package is that thing of like select a core and then say, we're going to do this for the first year, and then after that we'll expand beyond that. Or every term we're going to review at the end of each term whether we carry on or whether we change, and people will know there's a review process. But I think it's important that there's a number of different stages. So you need to get people familiar with the toolkit and reading the techniques. So that's why I'm trying to show pictures of people in rooms talking, because that's where the action is. I go to too many places, to be honest, where well, you're always at the start, people are waving their book and I've got your book, and you say, well, have you looked at it? And they go, oh no, not really, I haven't had time. And teachers are so busy that even though they've been given the book, they haven't had a chance to read them. So getting the books open in the training and talking about the techniques in the detail is an absolute key. So this one is opened up at worked examples and backward fading. You don't read it once and then say, right, yeah, I know that one. You constantly refer to it and say, what are the 5 steps in worked examples and backward fading? Let's make sure we're really getting into the detail. So that takes people needing to read, to discuss, and when I'm launching it, I would just pick 1 or 2 techniques. Sometimes I just do cold calling because it's the most common one that people come up with. No hands up, cold calling, getting it really well. And that shows people the technique in action. And we just spent the whole training session just talking about cold calling. And you find that there's, most people have some aspect of cold calling to work on because it's easier said than done. Is it an annual subscription that you pay for every year? Yeah, it's a good question because originally it was a one-off, but the one-off has paid for all the resources to download. But from now, the people who have previously subscribed before now, they've got through to the end of next year, so August 2023, and then from then on, it's an annual payment. But people joining now, it's the same. It's like whatever you pay now will take you through to the end of August, and then it's much less per year after that, like significantly. And compare with some other, dare I say, like any other competitor package we know of, it's way, way less per year than them. So I feel like it's pretty good value, but that's for you to decide. So yeah, it's going to be an annual amount to be a member. But at any time you choose to leave, you can download all the stuff and keep them forever. So all the PowerPoints, all the documents. It's just that they'll no longer be interactive on the Google site and no longer updated and so on. So that's not bad, but because it's all just files, you just keep them. So if you want to keep all the PowerPoints on your own server and you don't want to engage with the website anymore, you can always, it's not like you leave and lose it. You never will have that. You'll always be able to keep the resources you've paid for in the first year. Well, thank you, Simon. A new principle you have supported establishing. That's great. I really appreciate that. Should teams be departments? I really think they should be departments. Yeah, because if you're talking about modeling, you're talking about modeling how to write history essays or how to model, psychology essays or how to do maths problems or science. If you can weave the curriculum thinking with the techniques, you get much more. I would say where you mix teams, it's where you've got teams that are particularly struggling and there's no one in the team who can really offer pedagogical or curriculum leadership. And so you mix people up so those people are sort of guided by the stronger people in the school. And there are some scenarios I've come across that where in order to get ideas cross-fertilizing in an early on, you mix teams up and there's people talking to each other. That's breaking some of the silos that have existed. But I'd say that's not the ideal. The ideal is that I'm thinking about my maths teaching at the same time I'm thinking about my questioning techniques, but they're wedded together. And that's better done with the other maths teachers. So we're talking about maths questions. But that's my experience so far, that subject teams and phase teams are the more powerful engine room. Okay, well, we're going to stop there because we've come up to our hour. We don't like to go on. This is recorded, and because you are subscribed on this webinar, you'll get sent the link. So hopefully that will be useful. We'll also put it up because it's an open public one on YouTube anyway, so you've got to access it anyway. So I hope you found that really useful. Please do contact us, and any questions, we'll try to answer them. And if you really need, some additional input, sometimes if you're going for a big multi-academy trust thing and you just want some extra kind of finessing, we'll do all kinds of bespoke things. Sometimes you've got very small organizations say that we can barely afford it and there's only like 10 of us or whatever, and people go, okay. So there's lots of different scales. If it's very big or very small and you think it doesn't quite fit what we're offering, then let us know and we'll try to adapt for that. Okay, thanks so much everyone for joining us. It's been great to have so many people on the call. I hope you find that interesting, and I really hope you go and find walkthroughs useful in your practice. Thank you so much.